you been? It's been a little while. Yeah. I was talking about you. And then this one will serve you. All right, are we all ready? Everybody? Everybody? Everybody ready to go? Hello? If I can have your attention. We got a nice full little room here. Mr. Mayor?
Let me call the meeting order first.
Oh, exactly. Okay, I'll stand back.
We're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. And we're going to ask Commissioner Marcus Hardy of Crescent City if he'd lead us in the invocation and the pledge to the flag. Everybody please stand.
Let us all bow our heads. Most gracious Father, we want to welcome you into this building today. Lord, open our minds and our understanding. Lord, let this meeting be a great success and lead us into in the endeavors that we can carry our communities into a greater depth. In your name we pray. Amen.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Hill,
Here.
Commissioner Brown. Here. Commissioner Campbell,
Present.
Commissioner Norwood,
Here.
Commissioner Borum, Commissioner Flag,
Present.
and Mr. Deputy.
Okay. Have you had an opportunity to look over the minutes from the October 12th, 2015 meeting?
Motion to approve.
There's a motion to approve by Commissioner Campbell, second by Mr. Deputy. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Moving on to public comment. Is there anyone here for public comment? Seeing no one here for public comment, we'll go ahead and close public comment. We will now turn our workshop over to joint planning session with downtown Palatka and Main Street. Will be facilitated by Laura Dietrich, and we'll have comments at closing by Richard Jones. So, Ms. Dietrich, without further ado.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and fellow commissioners and everybody here. I know a lot of faces and there's some new faces, so really quick, I'm Laura Dietrich, I'm an urban planner. Years ago, I was a city planner for Jacksonville. Then I ran the Northeast Florida Regional Office for Kimley Horn Associates, a national full-service firm, for which I was working when we all worked together. Oh my goodness, started about 7, 8 years ago on the C.R.A. plans, for which we're here to talk about today. The last 4.5 years I've owned my own business. I'm a small business owner, Dietrich Planning, and I'm here to help facilitate this meeting and to get your input to talk about, really quick, we're going to do a refresher on some 101s for some of the new folks. I'm going to do a more thorough one in a separate meeting so we can actually get to the purpose and intent of this meeting. So I'm going to flash through that very quickly. But with that said, we're going to talk more about the posture of the plan. When I say the plan, I talk about that loosely because it's 3 different districts. We have 3 C.R.As. We have the Central Business District, which is what we're here to talk about tonight. We're referencing it as a CBD. We also have the North Historic District and the South Historic District. Those will be talked about in future meetings. Tonight, again, is focusing on the Central Business District. So with that, I'm just going to touch on a few slides. I apologize for flipping through some of them very quickly. Is this going to work? Is this on? Okay. Reasons for C.R.As, again, to remove blight, affordable housing, economic development, public space, access to the riverfront, parking, events, marketing. Some of these are the things that are the top 10 reasons why C.R.As and the Redevelopment Act was created in the first place. Again, Chapter 163, Part 3, and we won't get into all that tonight. I'll do that separately with some of the elected officials and those who want to call me. C.R.A. again, the whole point of creating C.R.A. is to eradicate blight and to lift it up. There's a balance to how you set up a C.R.A., and I kind of loosely refer to it as the haves help lift up the have-nots. You get a more successful, even playing field. There's just some history, we don't need to get into that. Again, what's really important at the end of the day, there's about 3 slides I'm going to focus on tonight that are the core fundamentals. The first one is you have to establish a boundary. You have to do that through a finding of necessity. You have to adopt a plan. These are all 3, which is why the cover shows all 3. When you adopt this plan is when the funding mechanism called a tax increment finance trust fund, which we'll talk about in a minute, actually can start activating. The clock starts ticking, and we'll get into that in a second. So when you adopt your plan, it's got to be in the plan and in the boundary. You cannot spend money from the TIF on projects that are not in the plan or not in the boundary. So north money can't be spent on projects that are not in the plan, in the north not in the central not in either one of those. They're all separate with different challenges, different goals. Nonetheless, they support one another. And their funds, driven by their frozen values, which we'll get into in a minute, have to be spent in that boundary for that plan. So, it is important also to note, the best plan is the kitchen sink, and that's encouraged by the law. If you have such a static tool that you have to keep hiring someone, to keep coming back, to keep updating and revising to add the newest idea or the newest priority, you're going to waste a lot of time and money. So the best plan, which is what we did, in my opinion, it's not everything that I think, there's some updates and assessments that probably need to be added given that times have changed a little bit and the priorities may have changed. But it's very, very comprehensive so that you still have what is probably today still the same priorities, maybe in different areas, and there may be some new ones you want to add. Okay, increment. What is increment? Here's the little, okay. In 1984, the C.R.A. was adopted. That means in 1984, all of the private property that's owned, its value is frozen. So the taxes that people pay on their private property, to that frozen level, in 1984, taxes associated with that value go to the city, go to the general fund. But for every dollar that the property increases in value after 1984, the taxes associated just with that increase in value, those go into a special kitty called a tax increment finance trust fund. It's like a savings account for things to be implemented from the plan. Now what happens in a down market? Your increment, it may drop below your increment, which means you're not earning anything. So there are some people in the state of Florida that actually, unfortunately, were encouraged to create plans in 2003 and 4, which means they'll never get a dime, because that's when the peak market. So with that, chapter, these are some of the statutory things. We don't need to get into all these things. What they can pay for, long lists that are all in the plan of what can happen. But what's interesting is what they can't pay for, because that list is shorter. They can't pay for public facilities like painting or fixing this building. They can't pay for going inside and doing repairs. They can't be on the CIP. The city has a capital improvements plan, and this is important, especially for you. If the CIP has an infrastructure project on it, and the C.R.A. says, you know what, we want to take that over and use TIF funds for that, you need to remove that from the city CIP for 3 years minimum before the C.R.A. can take it up, and vice versa. Otherwise, it'd be double dipping if you have it in 2 accounts. Okay, so again, board members, commissioners' expenses, things like that. But you can pay for limited exposure to nonprofits, capital expenditures, cost sharing, land acquisition, code enforcement, grants, technical assistance. Again, being careful. We did a memo a couple years ago through the legislature that talks about marketing, and that came about because the Azalea Festival, if y'all remember, we wanted to be able to give a loan so that way they could have seed money and then they'd pay it back. Bob's shaking his head, he remembers. So now that generated the legislative memo because they wanted to be clear what that meant. And so in the forms of loans and economic development, it works because it also took place in the district. Now, if it didn't take place in the district and they didn't benefit, nor did it create an economic development or be able to pay it back, probably wouldn't have been legal. Again, statutes, interlocal agreements, which we did with the county. Those of you who were along for the long journey, there was a lot of infighting, and we all made up and put some 20, 30 years of bad blood behind us, and the county and the city did an ILA, an interlocal agreement, and it was pretty amazing. It took a couple of years, but it was a pretty amazing experience. Okay, so with that, I want to move into what we're here for. Let's just get to the end of this. I think you all, or some of you know Carol Westmoreland. She is the executive director for the Florida Redevelopment Association. I used to be the South or Northeast rep for that. I'm not anymore. They've done away with that program because not everybody was educating. I kept educating, but not everybody did. So now she's trying to do that. I think Jonathan actually reached out to her recently, but she couldn't come down from Tallahassee. So if you need her information, Jonathan and Thad have it. And that's me. I'll leave cards at the end of this. Okay, so there is, can you do me a favor, Sam? There should be a minimized, or Jonathan, you want to jump in?
Minimize.
And that show, there's a minimized other image. It's called,
Which one are you looking at?
there's only two minimized, the one with the images, the picture. There's only 2 slides. You want me to come around?
Yeah, because you got /1 and it's.
I got what? Oh, wait, you just had it. Not that one. You can delete that. There you go. And then down below, make it big. Okay. First of all, there's a 4-page document that you all have, and if you don't, raise your hand. We will pass it around. This is just a real short, sweet summary of what a C.R.A. is. And later, again, we'll announce in the future when we're going to do a more thorough 101. Okay, so to refresh memories, we have 3 districts, but tonight we're going to talk about the CBD. There's a cover of the plan. All right, so this is your boundary. It goes to the railroad tracks, 11th Street, basically. So from Madison to Laurel, as it kind of bends around, it encompasses those districts. That was in place along with the bookended other districts. So what we're going to do is, for the sake of time, because we have got an hour and 15 minutes, and I want to make sure that Richard Jones has some time here at the end to talk with you all. Here are the ground rules. We all respect each other. We all respect each other's opinions. Good answers, great ideas come from all kinds, every walk, every background, every profession. You don't have to be a planner to have a great idea. So we're going to all, we're all going to be able to raise our hand, be respectful, and not talk over one another. We're going to stay on course. If I kind of manage you a little bit, it's because of the sake of time. So with that, what we want to get into is the intent of what I was asked to facilitate tonight, and that is to look at the posture of the plan, where we're at with it. And Jonathan recently wrote a report to speak to, I believe, the commission to talk about where they're at with some of the conditions on that, so he can walk us through some of those. But you have a document in front of you stapled. This takes you section by section through the CBD recommendations that the greater collective group, I think we adopted this plan on September 10th, 2009, after about 2 years of working through it. So we're basically going to look at the items that were chosen to be in this plan, what the status of some of those items are, if they've been accomplished, if they've been omitted, if they have been put into motion. Some of these may not be important anymore. Things may have changed. There may be some things that aren't in here that need to be in here now because conditions have changed. And that's, again, the great importance of a C.R.A. plan. It shouldn't be static. It's a living document. It should always be evolving. And also equally important is that the data has to be current. Demographics, crime, infrastructure, transportation, utilities, availability of parking or affordable housing, income, all of these things tie in to how the plan is implemented. If those things in any way, shape, or form have changed, which I'm sure they have, given that it's been 6 years, almost 7 years, then that too needs to be addressed. So, without further ado, and where did Jonathan and Thad, for the plan director, if you want to be able to point out to me, whoops, when we start going through these, the status of some of these as we get into it. That way the crowd, if they're not aware of where you're at with those, then we can call those out. Okay, so let's talk about land use and zoning. You've got a paper in front of you, Thad. You see those 8 recommendations in there. I think quite a bit of this actually has been addressed. So non-conforming uses, it is what it is. If things are grandfathered in, they're grandfathered in. Looking at the code, I think an update to the code still has yet to be done. Maybe sections have occurred. But how would you, does anyone want to speak after Thad to speak to about the zoning code and its current posture?
We've made some changes to the code that essentially allow for mixed uses in community redevelopment areas, more so than there used to be. We've also made some code changes that establish downtown overlay zoning district with design standards. All C.R.A. districts essentially are design review districts where new construction and alterations are reviewed to meet certain design standards. Those are kind of the major things we've done.
Okay, so what would you say in your code as a whole document, as far as the CBD is concerned, about impacts when you have applicants, business owners that want to come in, whether it's landscaping or signage? Are you having still several issues because the code's out of date?
I think we're pretty current. Now, downtown is pretty much exempt from landscaping requirements, parking exempt except for residential projects in more than 2 units. So there's not a lot of regulatory burdens other than the design standards per se. And those are pretty streamlined and simple.
Have you found that any of the landscaping or design requirements for the code currently have precluded successful streamlining or business implementation for small businesses?
It's hard to say. I mean, they haven't been in place for that long for us to really get a feel for it. I mean, the only example I can think of is we have a tinted window prohibition where the dark tinted windows are essentially not allowed, and we've had some people that we had a little pushback about that. I mean, the aquarium store, which is a good example.
Yeah, okay. So basically, and just, I mean, as you go through the permitting process and application process, you want to, as staff, kind of document and keep mind of things that deter successful movement of small business, because Palatka is not in a place right now to be so confined that it precludes small business, because you want to fill those spaces. You want to get those empty spaces filled, you want to get them on the tax rolls, start creating jobs, start generating revenue. That contributes to your TIF, even though the property tax is being paid, but sometimes if they fall off. So codes are very important. People tend to, if it's very, very difficult to get in somewhere, they'll go somewhere else. And that's one of the things that happens to a lot of towns and a lot of cities. I mean, from Palatka to Jacksonville, same thing. Nassau County, Clay County, if things are difficult, they'll leave. So definitely keep in mind on that. Okay, anything else with the code? You want to add real quick? Okay. How about, I know y'all talked about an entertainment district at one point. The CBD kind of already behaves that way with some festivals, your first Friday nights, I think. Are you still doing that?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so does anyone in the crowd, does anyone see anything with the land use and zoning recommendations that either hasn't been addressed or isn't here that you want to be addressed?
I think one time we were talking about looking at landscaping. Some of the folks looked at landscaping, and we were supposed to have a workshop on it, but we've had so many other workshops. But we needed to look at it to make sure it was attainable for the small business people that came in here.
Okay, so what we were actually just talking about, so
Yeah.
maybe a workshop on landscaping. Have you thought about setting that up for the public sometime, maybe in the future, Thad, to talk
We
about?
have looked at overall the landscape code, but essentially downtown is exempt from any landscaping requirements, so it hasn't been a real problem per se.
And when you say downtown, you mean further than the CBD?
Yes, the downtown zoning district,
So people in the CBD are exempt from landscaping?
except for parking lots. New parking
Okay.
lots have to conform to
Okay.
very basic landscaping.
And the city, the greater, well, I won't get into that, that's not over here. Okay, so is there am I hearing two different answers here then? Commissioner, do you feel that it's been addressed effectively, or do you think there still needs to be discussion in the public realm to talk about it? Because we'll put that down here as one of the recommendations, that it needs to be further discussed.
I think that us as city commissioners need to look at it, because we did have some people who were looking at it. It probably is not in the business district right now, but it should be looked over for everywhere.
Okay.
Because when people come in and they find impediments or things to slow them down from getting permitting, like you said, they're not gonna stay.
Right.
I don't think that that's a part of this conversation
Right.
we're having today.
Right, this is for the CBD.
Right.
Yeah, okay. All right, anything else on land use and zoning? Because we're gonna move on. Okay, directional signage and wayfinding. And what I'm doing here is I'm walking you through these so that way we can talk about what is actually in the plan, because then we're gonna start talking about some of the things that aren't in the plan